Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Our program believes that women should be treated with respect at all times and in all places. Here's today's moderator, Gloria Van Demeltrot.
Hello, and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Gloria Van Demeltrot, and we have a great show for you today. First, let me introduce my co-host, Susan Strauss.
Hi, Gloria. Good to be here.
Good. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
I think we're both excited about our guest, Jennifer Flowers. And Jennifer Flowers has recently been appointed Vice President and Women's League Commissioner of the Western Collegiate Hockey Association. Quite a title, Jennifer.
There are a lot of words in that title, aren't there? But yes, it's very exciting.
Can you tell us something about that title and something about you and how you happened to get chosen for this magnificent title?
Absolutely. So the title Vice President comes because the WCHA, which is a shortened version of Western Collegiate Hockey Association, is actually a men's conference and a women's conference. So we operate fairly separately, but we have, from the top down, we have a president, and then I would fall into the vice president role. But my main title is Commissioner of the Women's League. So we oversee 7 Division I women's hockey programs, 5 of which are in the state of Minnesota. So clearly the state of hockey is true when it comes to Division I women's hockey. I think I stepped into this role relatively seamlessly because I had a relationship with several of these institutions prior to this opportunity. So I'm excited to share more about kind of my journey, and I'm so thankful for you to having me here today.
I'd like to know about your journey. I mean, obviously, you've got to have interest in women's athletics, and I'm guessing you've probably been an athlete yourself. You're younger than we are, so you grew up where Title IX was something that you could embark in. So tell us a little bit about your journey, starting from when you were a kid to where you are now.
Absolutely. Sports has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My dad was a high school football coach, high school track coach, athletic director. I'm from a small town in Iowa, so I was fortunate to play every sport because we had to. We weren't going to have teams if not everyone competed in all sports. So as people talk about sport specialization and young people are choosing one sport so early, it's really difficult for me. It really disappoints me because I think they are missing out on so many other things. But I played everything growing up, had an amazing childhood experience with sport and through high school, and have felt so blessed to not ever been told no. I've always been able to play, which is something that, women that have come before me haven't had that opportunity. And
we represent that.
Absolutely,
yes,
absolutely.
We do.
And I think it's so important for those of us that have had the opportunities to make sure we're, number one, taking advantage of them, but also, saying thank you and making sure we appreciate and understand what was happening before us to allow us to have these opportunities.
What happened then? That was like in high school, but then you went into college. And did you narrow your focus of what sport you were engaged in? And if so, what was your favorite?
I played collegiate volleyball at Winona State, a Division II school in Winona, Minnesota. Also played softball for a year. That was a challenge to try to do 2 sports at that level, but I worked in the athletic department when I was in school. It really just, being around sport has always just provided me so much comfort. I'm a competitive person by nature, but I think sports are so valuable, not for the wins and losses, but for the relationships and the ability to do more things and travel. And, we played all over the upper Midwest. So I went to a lot of small towns around the upper Midwest that I would have never gone to had it not been for the opportunity to play. So.
Do you think your father had influence there? Being a football coach certainly does help. And you're a tall girl, so you were involved in sports even in grade school?
Absolutely, yes. And I have an older brother, so I think you'll hear a lot of young women say, especially women who play hockey, who say, my older brothers played and I just wanted to do what they did, and so that really was the same for me. My brother was a tremendous athlete, played Division I football, coaches football right now actually, and so it's just kind of always been a part of what we're doing. And I honestly thought I would be a coach, to be really upfront, and that path is just not really where things ended up for me, and I'm okay in that space. I have a tremendous amount of respect for coaches at every age level because it's a tremendous amount of responsibility, and in this day and age with things are just different. Parents are different. Social media has changed everything that everything that all of us do. So I feel really fortunate every day that my job is to work in sport with amazing young women. I'm very lucky.
I am astounded how athletics have changed through the years. When I was a little girl, I was not encouraged at all. I did not come from an athletic family, and I was not encouraged to play. We played baseball in the yard a little bit, but not much, and I just never was involved in it. And I look now how times have changed, and that's a beautiful thing. I think that's really, really a fine thing. One of my granddaughters comes from an athletic family. One of my sons married a girl whose family was very involved in athletics, and so their 4 children have been involved in every form of ball that you could possibly do, and my granddaughter's in hockey.
Awesome.
So it was so fun to go to their little kid hockey games. How do you encourage those young folks to really get involved in sports as they're growing up?
I think it's amazing to look around the Twin Cities and look at the various youth programs that there are available for young people. Every sport you can think of right now is available in one way or the other, which is phenomenal. It takes a village to make that happen, though, and it takes volunteer coaches and all of those things. And regardless of what sport it is, I would encourage anyone to get started and try it, because like I said, it's not about wins and losses. It's about camaraderie. It's about teamwork. It's about understanding that it's more we than me. And those are life skills. Those are things that will translate for people in any profession that they choose to go into. And I think that's why I'm personally just very passionate about sport, because it offers so much more than just the chance to play on the court or play on the field.
Go ahead. Expand a little on that.
Yeah.
What does it teach young people? Because I don't think that people really understand, in addition to being able to play a sport well, what does that inspire in them as a person?
Discipline, number one.
Discipline
is definitely a huge, you'll see kids who, if you have to show up on time and you have to be places and you have to take care of your shoes or your skates or whatever, that's a discipline. That's something that most moms and dads love for them to learn at the rink or on the court, because it's a challenge maybe at home. Right, it's a commitment. Right. And it's recognizing that it's about more than just yourself. Your teammates are counting on you to be there and to bring your best effort and to, lift them up when they need it as well. And so oftentimes when people are struggling, they find that comfort in their teammates. Their teammates become their friends. Some people refer to teams as families, which, there's a lot of ways to look at that, because a lot of times families are a little bit dysfunctional as well, but so are teams. And I think the best teams out there find that culture and find that ability to really recognize that it's about the bigger picture. It's not about, we're going to win because we're disciplined, we're doing it the right way, we're challenging each other, we're supporting each other. And that's why I think for women especially, I'm so grateful that we're at a place where it's the norm for women to have those opportunities.
Could you address Title IX a little bit?
Sure.
And especially we are seeing, with the women's soccer team and them coming forward about not getting paid as much as the men. Now, granted, that's a professional team, and you're not dealing with professionals, but perhaps you could talk about Title IX and some of the inequality that, even though we have Title IX, what inequality continues to exist? What kinds of discrimination, perhaps, might you and your teams experience because we still think of sports as being male-dominated? I mean, everything from the sports section of the paper, exemplifying male sports and sort of keeping the female sports on the back page. And I know that's not always true, but if you could just address some of that inequality in Title IX and what kind of pushback you may even still get or not.
Yeah, it's a huge question, and I'm a woman in a man's world, to be very honest, and specifically I think even in hockey more so than I was previously in my previous roles. the ceiling is being broken every day by women, and I think any profession across the country right now, people are recognizing that there are women with real value, and that women truly can bring a different perspective and a value to what's happening at their organization. And so the most important thing, and something that we talk about a lot when I'm talking with my peers or when I'm talking with our young student athletes, is when you get the opportunity to have a seat at the table, you have to not only take it, but be ready for it, because you might only get one chance. Your male counterpart may get 3 or 4 chances, and that's how it works right now. But you have to take advantage of your opportunities. And we see, I don't like the word discrimination as much, that feels a little bit strong, but certainly, you look at ticket sales and ticket prices and times of games, and in some ways we still don't showcase our women the way that maybe the women deserve. But as the women continue to achieve and continue to put themselves out there, and the soccer team is a great example, they aren't being quiet, right? I mean, they're not going to go away. It's going to continue because they believe in what they're fighting for. And they're showing, I had an amazing opportunity to listen to Julie Foudy, who was on the '99 World Cup championship team for soccer. And that's been 20 years, right? So she was talking about how proud that team is that now 20 years later, they're actually seeing the fruits of their labor, because they were the originators of this fight. But at that time, our country wasn't ready for all of that, and they had to lay the groundwork. And that's what we talk about a lot, especially in hockey. Hockey's going through a very interesting time right now at the professional level for women, and what's available to them, and how to best make professional women's hockey a viable option. And they're trying to follow the soccer model, which is an outstanding model to follow. Hockey's just a little bit younger. And so I hope in 10 years our conversation is different about what professional women's hockey looks like. But women have to be prepared, especially I think in sport and probably in every profession, to grind, to take your opportunities.
A part of that as well, when we talk about Title IX and sex equity, et cetera, would deal with transgender athletes, transgender female athletes. Have you had experience with that? If so, what kind of pushback? I mean, I've been reading about the pushback, but what can you offer us and the viewers about transgender women athletes?
Yeah, it's more prevalent than it's ever been. Just I think as anything becomes more open to conversation, there is more. But I would tell you that the role I was in previously at the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference, which is a Division II athletic conference in the upper Midwest, we put in what we called transgender guidelines, which was for the institutions, a place to go when this question was asked on campus. When a student athlete came to them and said, I'm transitioning, I'm thinking of transitioning, whatever that conversation was, it was a guideline for them. There are NCAA rules related to transgender student athletes, and when and where they can compete and how it affects their teams.
What are those rules?
They're massive. There's a lot of them, but it really comes down to timing of transition. And so if it's a team sport and you have a male transitioning to become a female, timing of all of that, when does that person technically considered a female, and how does that affect their male sport or vice versa? And so much of it comes down to whether or not the student athlete is willing to share. They don't have to.
Right.
No, that's
they don't have to. And so if they're willing to, and they understand maybe the outcomes that would come with that, a lot of them now are comfortable sharing because they want safe locker room space. They want safe space. They deserve safe space. And so it's an evolving topic. And I personally haven't worked yet with a student athlete in that space that I know of, but I think more and more we're more educated about how to handle it when it happens. And end of the day, like I said, it's a safe, every student athlete deserves that safe space and the opportunity to compete how they deserve to compete.
That is right. Can you tell us, you're obviously an age difference between Susan and myself, and tell us, if you can, what caused the changes that have come about that are so wonderful today, that the girls play hockey that certainly didn't in my time. So what has happened? What were the activities that went into effect? Who do you know who people were, individuals, or what happened?
I think you could point to a lot of individuals from a women's perspective. If you the Olympics are
Yes,
always that time of
yes.
year when there's so much notoriety and there's so much press and there's so much opportunity for young women to see other women. And that's really that's a huge thing. I tell my daughter, who's 8, all the time, you can't be what you can't see. So she has to see a role model that looks like her, that that she can resonate with in order to really believe that her dreams are possible. And so I think once we started to be able to see women succeed, we were able to see Olympians in the gymnastics and in figure skating and then the soccer team, and as that evolved and as the media took a little bit more opportunity to share those stories, then it just started the effects just came naturally, because again, if there are strong enough women who will get out there and say, like a Billie Jean King, right, and say, I'm the best, it doesn't matter if I'm a male or a female. There has to be people like that to start those conversations and to break those initial barriers, but then there has to be a flood of people that will come behind and jump in and get on board. And so there's a lot of women, I think, who have really paved the way, and thank goodness for them, because I say a lot to a lot of our young people, if you don't really know what Title IX is or how that impacts you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That means it's working. That means you don't recognize any inequalities with what you're doing. And I think that's amazing. I want them to understand everything about Title IX, because they wouldn't have the opportunities that they did if that hadn't been passed and if there hadn't been amazing women who kept pushing doors down. But if we're living in a space where our student athletes feel generally that they're being treated the same, it's working, and that's a really awesome thing.
That is wonderful. That is truly awesome. Do you see, I'm kind of taking this in a different direction, is there an academic benefit to being involved in sports for women or for men as well? Is there an academic benefit? Because there didn't used to be. There didn't used to be. It's brawn and muscle and ability to do that. Do they perform better academically?
The numbers would say yes. On most campuses, student-athlete GPAs are higher than the regular student GPAs, and some of that comes back to that word of discipline.
Is that for females and males?
Both.
It is, because I'd read males, no. So.
It depends on the sport. I mean, I think there's some stereotypes that could fall into that conversation as well, but when you just go a total number and add your whole department as one, student-athletes are generally half a point to a full point higher than regular students on campus. Student athletes are busy, and their time is very structured, and so that for some people that's an amazing way to stay structured with your academics, because you only have a certain window of time to be studying. When you don't have the commitment of a sport, you have more free time. You know how it is for everyone, right? That when you have time, maybe you don't focus on what you should focus on. So I think athletics in general just brings so much opportunity, and they have this unique space to develop relationships with professors a little bit differently, because they have to engage in conversation. They may miss class to travel for a game. So if they're smart and they go up and they have that conversation, they've already created a relationship with a professor that the average student maybe won't do because they don't need to, you know? So
do you find that the student athletes of women, might they have less of an issue with mental health, for example, depression or PTSD or bipolar? Have there been any studies on that to demonstrate that they are emotionally more healthy or not?
Not that I know of, and I will tell you this, mental health at the collegiate level specifically is the biggest challenge we're facing. And I think everyone is trying to really stay on top of it, and it's one of those things so that similar to anything, when you start talking about it more, when the conversation becomes more safe to have, then there's more of it.
Yes.
And so to this point, I have not read any studies related to male or female. I've read a lot of studies related to age, and as the pressures of, depending on sport and personality, the pressures of maintaining a high level of success, typically your collegiate student athletes are the best student athlete coming through high school, so they've always maybe recognized that success, and then they get to college and they're on a team with everyone who was the best at their high school. And so then their role on the team maybe changes or things become more challenging. That's very, very difficult for, particularly for freshmen.
Good point.
Freshman year is incredibly challenging for young people, regardless.
Regardless,
yes. Moving away from home, you're on your own, all of those things, and then you add into it the pressure or the joy, either way, of competing on a team. It's just another layer, and so it is definitely probably the hottest button topic right now, mental health all the way around.
Interesting. Going back farther then, again to younger children, in choosing a sport, we want them, as parents, we want them to be well-rounded. We want our girls to play hockey and the boys to play baseball or volleyball or whatever. We want them to get involved in different sports. Do you find them getting cued into one sport at younger ages as we go on in time, or are they encouraged to keep being involved in lots of different sports? When do they get narrowed down?
I wish I knew the exact answer to that. That's a very frustrating thing for me. The trends right now are definitely to specialize faster.
Yes.
So you have young people who are 8 to 10 years old already deciding that hockey is it and that's all that I'm going to do. And while that works for some, for others, they're missing the opportunity to really develop their body in different ways. If you study the trends of injuries, of athletic injuries, specifically at the collegiate and then the professional level, more and more people are getting injured because they've been playing the same sport and doing the same motor activities with whatever muscles for years. They've not developed other muscles because they haven't played other sports. And so there's a lot of negatives, I think, to specialization, but the pressure to specialize exists. And so for parents, you know, again, I have an 8-year-old who's just kind of starting to get into that, and I'm already hearing and feeling that, what if she misses a practice? You know, I mean, she's 8. If she misses a practice, she's going to be fine. But that pressure is real, and parents feel that. And so it's hard to navigate that space of, if I don't put them on this if I don't let them play basketball all year round, and if they miss this chance on this team, then they're not going to be good enough, or they're going to miss that opportunity to keep playing with their friends, or whatever that is. That exists. And so I think that's what's funneling this idea of specialization. And I also just think there's a general kind of misconception that if you specialize, then you're going to be so great that you're going to get a college scholarship.
That's what I was going to bring up too. Yeah,
it's just not as for some. That
might work, but generally
not for everyone.
I know my granddaughter, my son-in-law has coached both my grandson and my granddaughter. I mean, my grandson just turned 15, my granddaughter's 12 and a half, and they've been involved in sports since, well, I remember my grandson learning, you know, what is it when they're just little kids and they're baseball. I mean, and I can, you know, when you'd hit on
the T-ball,
and he'd be on the base, you know, looking up at the birds, and here would go, you know, I can remember. And now, of course, he's 15, and I mean, whew, he goes for it. But his dad, because he was a coach, but also because he was into sports and he believes it's important, has really emphasized that with both of them. And I tell you, he's like that. If you miss a practice, you are letting your teammates down. You go, whether you don't feel all that great or not, you go. My daughter's going, oh, for Pete's sakes, they're kids, give them a break. So they battle that a little bit. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit more about what your roles and responsibilities are in this new position, and what all will you be doing?
So it's interesting. That's a question that I've worked now at a conference office for 4 years, and so previously I was in the NSIC and now with the WCHA, and people ask all the time, like, what does that mean? What do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do? So our job is to regulate the activities of the programs, and so we put on our conference championship. Any, you know, like if you think about the Big Ten, for instance, right? So Minnesota plays in the Big Ten. They have the same space. They have to have people who are hiring the officials, making the schedules, putting the policies and procedures in place for how they can compete in their games, providing the kind of conduit between the institutions and the NCAA and things like that. So the most fun, obviously, for me is when I can get on campus or when I'm around the young women and we can really dig into that. That's what my joy is, for sure. But just being able to be a part of a league that is so successful. The WCHA is the premier league in women's hockey. We've won 17 of the 20 national championships.
Wow.
I mean, it's amazing, right? And so we're elite in a number of ways, and that's an amazing space to be in. The people that I work with day in and day out are awesome, with the best interests of our young women at heart. And so we get to do a lot of things. Right now we're putting a lot of effort into we call it our Final Face-Off, which is our Final Four championship that we host at Ritter Arena on the campus of Minnesota. But some new things that we're doing this year, sort of under my watch, are trying to find ways to engage young girls. So we're gonna.
By young, what do you mean?
8U, 10U, 12U.
Yes.
They're all starting to play. There's
Right.
Minnesota's the state with the highest participation numbers in girls hockey in the country. So we want to show them again, kind of back to this idea of you can't be what you can't see. We want them
Right.
to see our amazing women. So we're going to take our teams out into the elementary schools in Minneapolis.
Wow.
We're going to bring some youth teams in to practice with us on a
that'd
day.
be fun
and
to see that.
wonderful.
Highlight them a little
Wonderful.
bit during the championship as well. So just trying to find ways to connect the dots,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's really, really important for those young girls to see, hey, there is a place for me to
Exactly.
play if I want to, right? If I want to. So
Where were you when I was 8?
Yeah, right. What credentials do you have, or did you need to have to assume this role? Education and experience.
So actually, my undergraduate degree is in elementary education.
Okay.
I thought for a long time that I would end up being a high school teacher and coach, or an elementary school teacher and coach, and that was sort of what I knew growing up, right? So also sort of maybe the backup plan if I got to a point where I wanted my summers off and I wanted to be in education. But I think education and coaching are so similar, really. I mean, it really is a very similar path in terms of how you work with people. But I got a master's degree in sport management from the U of M. And really from that master's degree was that I did it in 1 year, believe it or not. I'm not sure how. I would never do it again, but I did, thankfully. But you really, when you're getting a master's in whatever field, right, it's very narrow focused.
Yes.
And you get to really dig into what you're passionate about. So that was a really phenomenal year for me. And from then on, I just have been so lucky to kind of find myself in the right places with the right people. I think sport is similar likely to other professions, but it really is a lot about who you know.
Yes.
And if you can come in and do a good job, and for me, it's a lot. I've learned a lot at every step, and I think that's been important. And I was on a campus at Winona State for on and off for about 7 years, and so in an administrative role within athletics. And so in that space, you get to see firsthand what the student athletes are going through. You work with coaches, you get to do all of that. So then when the conference office piece comes along as an opportunity, you have this different mindset coming to the conference because you've been at the institution. And so I think when the WCHA opportunity came, a lot of the positives for me were that I had done both. I'd been a student athlete, I'd been on a campus, I'd been at the conference level already. So from that perspective, I was very well-rounded in my experiences. I was certainly very concerned. I had no hockey experience before. I'd never played. Really didn't know. I'm a sports fan, so I watched hockey, but didn't have any background in hockey. And so that was a concern of mine when I applied. I had colleagues we have 4 institutions in the WCHA who play Division I hockey, but they're Division II, and so I worked with them in my previous role. They're the ones that said, "This is a great fit for you. You can do this. You should go for it."
Jennifer Flowers, thank you so much for being our guest today. I think you've educated us all in a beautiful way about women in athletics. Susan, thank you for being a co-host today.
My pleasure.
Great questions. To our audience, thank you so much for watching, viewers, and we hope to see you next time on It's a Woman's World.